Hello everybody, Steven here with Cardboard Coalition, and today we figured we'd bring you a how to play of Sherriff of Nottingham 2nd edition. And this is from CMON Games. And what is our player count? I always have to flip it around. There we go, that's what we're looking for, right? So this is a 3 to 6 player game for ages 14 plus, and it takes around 14 minutes. All right, so what we got going here is a 4-player game is what we have set up. So how do you go about setup? So for setup, there are just a few things that we need to do. This is a very quick setup game. So first off, you have players pick the board they want. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't actually even give the names. It just kind of gives you a place to put cards. It lets you know some end of game bonuses. Well, right here, places to put cards. It also gives you your turn order down here. There's no name on the card. It's really just pick your color. There's the back in case you were wondering. So each player picks their color. They get the color associated bag with that color. You go and make sure everybody has that. The next thing you do is you choose someone to be the banker. This is kind of nice. I'm pulling the tray out right now. The tray actually comes out, but you have a tray with a whole bunch of coins. Those are just extra bags. You could choose a banker. You go ahead and give that tray to the banker. We'll take it out of shop for now, that's fine. So you choose someone to be the banker. That banker gives each player 50 coins. I think they just call it gold in here, but they're different colors, so I like to call it coins. 50 coins. So each player gets 50 coins. After you've done that, you go ahead and you shuffle up the goods cards, which are right here. It's a nice thick deck. I know it's hard for you guys to see, but it's a big deck of cards. So you go ahead and shuffle those up, and you pass out 6 cards to each player. So each player has their 6 cards, all right? Once that's done, you look to figure out who the first player is going to be. And how you do that is you figure out who has the most points right now. So points are basically the gold or the coins that you have plus any merchandise you have in your hand. You don't have these in your stand yet, they're in your hand. So everybody would go through, and if you look up here, this is how much gold each one of these things is worth. And the person with the highest becomes the sheriff for the first round. So we went ahead and give the sheriff to green. I can't remember the number count when I went through, but green had the most. When you put their coins and the cost of their cards together, they become the first sheriff for the first time. Everybody gets to be sheriff. And in a 4-player game, 4 to 5 players, everyone's the sheriff twice. For 6 players, there's a different setup, and we won't go into this. And if we do, it'll be really briefly. And for 3 players, you go 3 rounds. So since this is a 4-player game, once everybody's been the sheriff twice, then you go ahead and finish the game. That's what does the end game mechanic, once everybody's been sheriff twice. And how sheriff moves around in the 3 to 4 player game is, say this person's sheriff first, next round, blue's gonna be sheriff, next round, black, and you just go around the table clockwise until everybody has been sheriff twice. There's your little sheriff standee for you guys. That just lets you know who's sheriff. So once all that's ready, then it's time to go ahead and go through the different phases. Each round has 5 phases. And the phases are the market phase, the load merchant bag phase, the land merchant bag, the market phase, the load merchant bag phase, declarations, then you have inspection, and then you have end of round. And that's the end of the round is really the setup. So those are the 5 phases of each round. So before we go into the phases, there's one thing I kind of want to point out really quick. And that's the iconography of your cards. So there's a couple things to know. Right now we just have the contraband cards and the legal good cards. We do not have, the base set also comes with King's Goods, I believe they're called. They're a purple bordered card. We won't go into that in this video. So Your legal goods, right? They have this blue border, right? Your contraband goods have a red border. That's the difference between those. Now, the other thing to pay attention to, and they're all the same in this sense, is you have a profit or how much it's worth. So you get 3 gold or 3 coins. That's what a loaf of bread's worth. And then you have a penalty, -2. And we'll talk about the penalty in a little bit. Either the sheriff pays the penalty or you as a merchant pay the penalty depending on what goes on. And as you can see, the contraband goods have a higher coin count and a higher penalty count. So you got mead, you got some silk. I think we actually have them all here. No, we're missing the crossbow, and you got some pepper. All right, so that's how the cards work. This is your points or your coins. This is your penalty. And then the one other thing, I'll get a little closer, this 4+, this is just to let you know if you're playing a game with 4 or more people, you add all the 4+ cards. If you're playing a game with 3 people, you don't put in those 4+ cards. That's all that means right there. All right, so what this game is you are a merchant, right? And you all take turns as a sheriff, but you're trying to sneak goods into Nottingham, right? You want to have the most successful market. These are your market tiles. You want to make sure you have the most successful market. And how you do that is by having legal goods and your contraband, right? And there's a mix of them. Right. So the theme of the game is you're trying to smuggle things past the sheriff. That's all the theme is. How the game is played is in those 5 phases per round, right? And so let's go ahead and dive a little deeper into the phases. So our first phase, which is the market phase. In the market phase, what you do is you look at your hand and you can discard as many cards as you want and draw back up. So you might look at this and think, I want as much bread as I can get. And I'll explain it really quick, but I'll go into depth a little bit later. When you put cards in your bag, when you do your declaration to the sheriff, you can only say 1 legal good. So right now I can only say bread or cheese, and I have 2 breads. So I might want to get rid of some of these cards for some more bread. So let's go ahead and say I look at these. I'm going to keep this because the silk has really high points, but I might get rid of these other contraband and this cheese in hopes. So I'm going to get rid of 3 cards and I'm going to draw up 3. And my hopes are that I can get some more bread because it's always best to bring in actual goods. So we got a chicken, and a chicken. Well, not bread, but now we have 3 chickens that we can get in. So that is the first phase, the market phase. That's where you discard from your hand and you draw up as many cards as you discarded. Your next phase is your loading the bag phase. So what you do there, you do this in secret. You don't want people to know what you have. You go ahead and look at what you got. And we're going to say, let's get rid of the chickens and we're going to try to sneak something in there. And you do this quietly to yourself. So you take these. You go ahead and put them in your bag and you seal the bag. One of the things that I've noticed so far is I don't think these bags are strong enough to snap this closed because it snaps really tight and then pull it open. I found I have to keep prying them open. So instead of snapping the bag closed, I just close the bag, right? And then each player goes through and they do the same thing. They go ahead and they pick cards and they decide what they're going to put in their bag because now we're in the bag phase. They've already gone past the market phase where they get rid of cards. Now, the next phase is declaration. And how this works is whoever the sheriff is, during the first 2 phases, the sheriff doesn't do anything. The sheriff's whole job is to watch. So even though you're a merchant and you're acting as the sheriff, you don't go through the market phase, you don't go through the bag phase, you don't go through the declaration phase. You're involved in the inspection and the end of round phases. So you wouldn't look through your cards right now. You're not supposed to. You don't put any cards in your bag because you're the sheriff. So green's the sheriff. Now, so we're on to the declaration phase, the 3rd phase. And how that works is you give your bag to the sheriff and you say, You have to tell the truth about how many cards are in here. I believe, I could be wrong, I think you have to tell the truth about how many cards. It seems odd not to, because you can feel the bag. And people are always allowed to see what you have. They can't see exactly what you have, but how many cards you have. So you wouldn't want to lie about that. So you would say, Black would say, I have 4 chickens. And you have to be on it. You have to call out one of the items that are in your bag. So I picked chickens, because remember we had 3 chickens in there. And I'm going to say I'm just carrying 4 chickens into the market, Sheriff, and I give the sheriff my bag. And then everybody goes through and everybody declares, and they give the sheriff their bag. Once everybody's declared what's in their bag and they hand it over to the sheriff, then we move into the inspection phase. And during the inspection phase, the sheriff decides what they want to do. And there's lots of things they can do. They can inspect the bags. They could just let the bags pass, right? And it's really up to the sheriff. Now, there are some catches that go on here. So, if the sheriff says, I want to inspect Blue's bag, Blue can try to bribe the sheriff, right? And they can bribe the sheriff using a handful of things, such as the gold that they have. They can try to bribe them with legal goods. So this is where legal goods are. Legal goods they actually have gotten in and to their stand. They can try to bribe the sheriff with some of their contraband, right? Or they can try to bribe the sheriff with something that's in their bag, right? So there's one more thing, and it gets a little tricky there, but there's one more thing, and it's future promises. But we'll get into future promises last. So if the sheriff decides to inspect your bag, you could say, you can offer them things from your stand that you already have placed out in your stand, legal goods, contraband. You can offer them stuff that's in your bag, right? But you have to tell the truth about what you're offering them from the bag or from the stand. And then the sheriff can decide either to take your bribe and let you go ahead and go through, or they can decide to inspect your bag. So let's go back to this. Let's say sheriff says they want to look at Black's bag. Black's like, you know what, sheriff? How about you don't look at my bag? And I'm going to give you 5 coin. And the sheriff accepts that 5 coin. Those 5 coins go to the sheriff. And then Black gets their bag. Once Black gets their bag back, they get to open it up. They don't show anybody their contraband, but they set it in the contraband area. And then they set out their chickens, their 4 chickens. Where's the chickens on here? And they would put the 4 chickens right there, right? And then next player goes, next player goes, next player goes. Now, let's say that the sheriff decides not to take the bribe, and they decide to look at the bag. So the sheriff, if they take the bribe, they can't look at the bag. You have to say, deal, deal. It's one of the things they tell you. You can say deal. So if Black says, I'm going to give you 5 coins not to look at the bag, sheriff says deal, deal's done. Sheriff cannot look in the bag. They have to pass it back to Black. But sheriff, once it's offered, they can go, I don't know. And the sheriff can decide to look in the bag. So now 2 things can happen when the sheriff looks in the bag. 1, if you pull out, the sheriff opens the bag, and let's say there's 4 chickens in here like we said. Let's pretend like this one's a chicken. There's 4 chickens. The sheriff was wrong, and it was 4 chickens like the person declared. The sheriff owes that person the penalty amount. So the sheriff would owe the person 6 coins because they were telling the truth. That person also gets all their cards. Let's say they're the 4 chickens, and they get to put them down with the chickens. Now, the other thing that happens is when the sheriff inspects the bag, he can find out that you're lying, as in this case, Black was lying, right? So the sheriff would look at this and go, oh, you're lying. When someone's lying, there are 3 things to remember. Anything they were telling the truth about. They did say they had chickens. They get to keep all their chickens. So their chickens get to go to their stand. Things that they were lying about, contraband, or say they threw cheese in there or something. Anything they're lying about goes to the discard pile, and that merchant has to pay the penalty to the sheriff. So in this case, it'd be -4, it'd be 4 coins. Black would have to pay the sheriff 4 coins, right? And that's how the inspection phase works. You The sheriff decides either to inspect bags or to not inspect bags. There can be bribing going on, right? Once the sheriff decides to not inspect the bag because of bribe, or they just decide not to, they give the bag back. When the sheriff decides to inspect the bag, either the sheriff has to pay a penalty if the merchant's telling the truth, or the merchant pays a penalty if they were lying, which part of the penalty is they have to get rid of their contraband and pay the sheriff. Now, one of the things I do want to talk about really quick now it passed through my head, you could never declare contraband items because they're not supposed to be in there. Red bordered items, you could never say I have 2 silk in my bag. You never want to say that. You can only say things that are legal items, such as your bread, your cheese, your apples, and your chickens, right? Any contraband you have to lie about. So in a sense, you're going to have to lie in this game at some point or another. And then you can lie about your legal goods, right? So there's 2 bread. Let's say they said 3 bread, but they put a cheese in there to sneak it past them. So you have to lie about red, you can lie about blue, and you always have to say the number of cards that are in your bag and pick one of the legal goods that it is. And you can lie, you could say they're all chickens. I don't know why you would do that, but you could lie and say they're all chickens, 3 chickens, when you put in 2 bread and a cheese. All right, so if you remember, I did say that there is one thing that gets a little tricky, and that is the promises of future favors. So this is how it goes. Let's say the sheriff wants to inspect Black's bag. Black's like, oh crap, I have some contraband in there. And they don't want to offer up anything from their stand, anything from their bag, or any gold. But what they do say is, if you don't inspect my bag this round, when I'm sheriff, I won't inspect your bag. That's a legal move, right? But you have to watch it. Because when it comes around to Black's turn and Black gets to be the sheriff, they can go back on what their promise was. And they can decide to still inspect Green's bag. Future promises don't have to be held, right? But if you promise something to the sheriff that you actually have, you have to give it to him. But I forget what they call it. It's like no honor among thieves. Let me try to find it really quick so I can give you guys the name. Honor among thieves, right? And what that means is basically, just remember, future promises don't have to be upheld, right? It might get that person through, but they don't have to follow through later on. So that's that honor among thieves thing. So what also can happen, and one of the examples they give is Green is the sheriff, Black's still trying to get their bag through that has contraband in it. And Black says, I will give you, 20 coins. And you have to promise me that you're going to inspect Blue's bag. For whatever reason, Black has something out for Blue. And they give the sheriff those 20. On the sheriff's turn, after they've done that, sheriff can decide to not inspect Blue's bag still, or they can inspect Blue's bag because they were given 20 coins. So there is some negotiation there. So just keep in mind, if you offer something that you physically have, you have to give it up. Something from your bag, something from your market, any of the spots in the market, or a coin, you have to give that to the sheriff. But if it's future promises and favors like, hey, I won't check your bag if you don't check mine, or hey, check out their bag, and I'll give you 5 coins, let me pass. There's a lot of wheeling and dealing that goes on. Just remember, future promises don't have to be upheld, things like that, but physical items you have to give to the sheriff in the deal. And the deal's made once someone says deal. That's how you know. You can't just hand the sheriff stuff and say, okay, we made a deal. All right, so that's the inspection phase. Once the inspection phase is done, then you go ahead and you go to the end of the round phase. And at the end of the round phase, there are just some basic cleanup things you do. So everybody draws their hand back up to 6, right? So let's say Black got everything across, right? So Black would draw their hand back up to 6. So they got 4 cards out. Black would have to take 4 more cards. 1, 2, 3, 4. So they get their 4 cards, which gets their hand back up to 6 cards. Everyone gets up to 6. Everyone draws back up to 6, depending on what they need. So this also means that cards that you didn't get out of your hand, they stay in your hand. That goes into you're going to have to try to get this contraband through somehow or discard it during the market phase, but you keep cards in your hand. So everyone draws back up to 6 cards. Sheriff moves to the next person, and then you start back over at the market phase. And you do that until, in a 4-player game, like I said, until everybody's played twice. 4 or 5-player game, everyone's played twice. A 6-player game, there's some different rules. They're kind of interesting that I won't go through in this video. And then in a 3-player game, everybody goes through twice. And that is basically how you play the game. Once everybody's gone through twice, you get into your scoring phase. And how the scoring phase works, and we'll go ahead and we'll look over here at black since we have a little bit of stuff out here. You count all your coins that you've made from your legal goods. Remember, blue is legal goods. Then you count all your contraband coins that you get. Then you count all your coins you have left over, and they all count as a single point. And then you go ahead and look, and there's some bonuses. So you can become the king or queen of apples, chickens, bread, or cheese. How that works is having the most of that item in second most, second most. Now, just really quick, if there's tie for the most, 2 or more people have the same amount, the same high amount for the most. So let's say we have chickens here. Let's say 2 people have chickens. They would add the first and second, so the kings and queens together, and they would divide those points up. Now, if there's a tie for second most, you take whatever points are given there and you divide them up and you round the number. All right, so that's the extra bonuses on here. Those are your king and queen. So you can be the king of chickens and the queen of bread, right? And then whoever has the highest points, once you put all those points together, is the winner. If there is a tie, whoever has the most legal goods is the winner. If there's still a tie, whoever has the most contraband is the winner. And if there is still one more tie, the tie is shared like they usually do. When you can't figure out a tie, the tie gets shared. Now, as I said, in this video, I won't talk about the 6-player. There's some extra mechanics that go on. And in the box, they actually give you some, I think I have it put away where I can't grab it easily. Oh, nope, I can grab them. So they actually give you a couple extra ways to play the game. So these are for the 6 players. And I'll just say it really basically. This is how you make sure everybody has gone twice. So in 6 players, you still go twice, but you draw the cards. And as you see, the cards match the different merchants. They call them deputies. They also have a different way to play where you have contraband. I don't know exactly what it's called, black market cards. So it's whoever gets gets 3 mead. The first person to get 3 mead contraband gets rid of the mead. They get that. Next person, and they get these points instead of what they would get with the mead. And they have one for pepper. They have one for silk. These are the black market cards. And then the last thing is this is just the king's goods. So commoners shouldn't have these. Commoners shouldn't have roosters. I don't know why roosters would taste better than chickens. They shouldn't have these special breads, these fancy cheeses, right? There's these super fancy cheeses, and then there's better apples, right? Golden and green apples instead of red apples. These work as contraband. You can't declare these as apples when you turn them in because you're not supposed to have these king's apples, these yellow and green apples, right? So these work as contraband. But in the beginning, they tell you, go ahead and play with the basic setup. Once you're done with that, then you can move forward. There are a couple other ways that you can change it, and they talk about the end of the rule book. And it's things like taking 10 cards out of here. So if you have friends that are card counters, making a hand of 7. And I can't remember off the top of my head the other one. I'm flipping through the book off to the side if you guys cannot tell. Oh, those are the other 2. That's all it is. It's a get rid of 10 cards or do the hands up to 7. So you would carry 7 cards instead of 6. right? And like I said, I'm not going to go too in depth with the 6-player because there's a handful of rules that are involved in that. Not too complicated. It just has to do with that stack of cards. And instead of the sheriff, you have some deputies, and 2 people are always the deputies, and they divide they collect contraband as a group and divide it up at the end. Things like that. They have to agree upon things, or they can do it separately. So there's just extra rules. But that is how you play, how you set up really and play Sherriff of Nottingham, 2nd edition. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm Steven with Cardboard Coalition. I'll see you later, everybody. Bye.